Urunga.
Thank you very much, Mr Acting Speaker. I rise to support the bill, which is major, ambitious, meaningful reform to what has been a real problem area out in regional South Australia. So I'm particularly pleased as a regional MP to rise today to support the Landscape SA bill because it is particularly relevant to regional communities and is one which I believe there is plenty to like about. So, Mr Acting Speaker, this bill establishes a new framework to better manage this state's natural resources, and of particular note are the features of decentralised decision-making, which is finally being instituted and returning that decision-making to the local communities, a more simple and accessible system, a very welcome back-to-basics approach, caps on levies to further address costs of living pressures, the inclusion of a new statewide Landscape Priorities Fund, a grassroots grants program that is enshrined in legislation by the bill and which recognises the value of local knowledge and expertise, giving regional and rural communities a greater say into the management of the natural resources around them, and importantly, the refocus on actually delivering practical on-ground outcomes, Mr Acting Speaker. Practical on-ground outcomes, actually tangible, meaningful improvement to the lives of those people that live around the natural resources that need all the protection that we can offer. What we heard during the consultation and planning processes for this important natural resources management reform was that people want to see more doing and less talking about doing, Mr Speaker. And that's what this bill does. It delivers practical environmental outcomes that protect our environment and benefit local communities. It's a mantra I particularly believe in, and I'm welcoming it, and I'm really excited to see it as the basis for this bill. So there's plenty to like about Landscape's SA Act, and the reform within is also importantly the delivery of another pre-election commitment by the Marshall Liberal government, another pre-election commitment held. So, Mr Acting Speaker, the repetitive overlapping planning arrangements have been removed. Each of the new regional boards outlined under the new Act will have a high-level 5-year regional landscape plan that sets out 5 priorities for managing the region's landscapes and identifies how success will be evaluated. Plans will be simple and approval processes have been streamlined. Each board will set its own budget, which will be set out in an annual business plan and clearly show the expenditure proposed for each of its priorities. This will improve the ability of the board to manage its own business. Boards will be required to keep proper accounts and publicly report on their activities annually, including a specific report on the actual expenditure of levy funds for the relevant financial year tracked against the board's budget for that year. Importantly, boards will be responsible for setting strategy and approving programs, cutting out unnecessary high-level approval processes which are time-consuming, and in addition to being responsible for their own budgets, they will employ a general manager who will be responsible for employing and directing staff. All of these measures will see less time planning what has to be done and more time actually doing what is required. There will be timelines for completion of projects, further instilling confidence by the communities that the new board will have to serve and that they will see direct outcomes for their money. Boards will be required to outsource aspects of these priorities to the private and non-government sector to create jobs and drive investment further, and local councils will be encouraged to apply to undertake this work. This is all important to mention as the partnerships and the localised teamwork that will follow will be invaluable for all involved, Mr Acting Speaker. Land and soil management will be a priority for the new landscape boards, particularly in regional areas, and this work will be achieved through greater and closer ties with landholders. In short, Mr Acting Speaker, I view the introduction of the Landscape South Australia Bill into this parliament as another exciting development for regional South Australia, heralding in a much-needed complete overhaul and reform of natural resources management. The feedback I have received since being the member for Narungga is that, broadly, it is generally accepted that the natural resources management system is no longer serving its purpose, with non-localised decision-making, high fees and inefficiencies. As stated by Minister Spears when introducing the bill to this House, regional communities want a simpler system, a greater voice in decision-making and board members that actually reflect the communities. The new Landscape SA framework, as proposed, I believe, will solve these problems and, importantly, also cap increases to land and water levies to CPI to further ease cost of living pressures that are being felt so hard by so many throughout our state. This important reform will see local, democratically elected representation on the new Landscape SA regional boards, lower fees and money raised in each region staying in that region. What a novel idea that is, Mr Acting Speaker. With so much beautiful fauna and flora in the Narungga electorate, it is important we have a practical system to look after it, and this reform will help that cause, I believe. The introduction of this bill follows an extensive 3-month public consultation process involving 26 community forums, 23 engagement sessions and 250 written submissions being received. Of the new regional landscape boundaries that are proposed, I believe they better align regions with communities of interest and local government boundaries, so better enabling communities to work together in managing landscapes. In my patch, it is proposed that the new Northern and Yorke landscape region will include the whole of the Narungga electorate, with the additional areas of Burra, Springton and Mount Pleasant, currently located in the Murray-Darling Basin NRM region, as well as Gawler and Mallala, which is currently in the Adelaide, Mount Lofty and Ranges region. I can attest that Burra, Springton and Mount Pleasant are a better fit in the Northern and Yorke region than the Murray-Darling Basin region, and that including Gawler and Mallala in the Northern and Yorke region is a far more logical fit than where it currently finds itself in the Mount Lofty Ranges region. I also personally like that, as part of the reforms, the government has sought to expand the scope of natural resource management to include coastlines that are adjacent to land which have not had the care or attention that they require. The Narungga electorate, which features the Yorke Peninsula leg of coastlines, has, unfortunately, a myriad of erosion and sand drift issues it currently is facing, and it is my hope that the new recognition of coasts and seas within this new legislative framework will result in new partnerships, a collaboration of vital resources, and a better coordinated approach which better recognises the value of our pristine coastlines. It is also noted that the reform under the new Act offers a dedicated, clearly defined role in assisting with the management of the impact of native animals, and also recognises that weed control is a critical component of preserving biodiversity in the regions. Each board will be able to work in partnership with their local community and relevant authorities to work out what the best approach is for their region and local circumstances. When we consider pest, plant and animal control, this bill does away with the action plans and replaces them with action orders. This is further welcome streamlining. In the response to the feedback that there needs to be a simpler and faster process, rather than the landholder identifying what action is needed, going forward, the authorised officers will be able to issue an action order setting out what action needs to be taken, and we can be confident that it will be. Another example is removing the distinction between state and regional authorised officers to increase compliance capacity, meaning tasks can get done quicker. Currently, regional authorised officers can only operate within their region and need to be cross-authorised by multiple NRM boards in order to be able to deal with cross-boundary issues such as managing pests, plants and animals. This is a classic example of unnecessary red tape, Mr Acting Speaker. Regional landscape boards are also to have a defined role in helping manage native species that are causing adverse impacts. This reform also importantly simplifies the planning load for boards, removes prescriptive consultation requirements and replaces unnecessary administrative processes such as a requirement to gazette a notice as to the basis of assessment of water taken each year and referring matters to the Natural Resources Committee unnecessarily. The new Landscape SA Act will also vitally put people at the heart of management of our natural resources. The people that live in the regions and know them best will be put at the front of this reform. That recognises that those who work on the land on a daily basis are best placed to sustain its environment. This bill recognises the value of strong on-the-ground partnerships and the value of the knowledge that land users have. we are repealing the Natural Resources Management Act and replacing it with the Landscape SA Act to reduce the level of red tape and give real focus on practical programs and on-ground outcomes delivered by local, skilled people who care about the land and soil around them, and whom this government recognises have the capacity and valued expertise and experience to directly contribute. And that is why the newly created landscape boards that are to replace the existing NRM boards will be responsible for setting strategy and approving programs. They will sit at arm's length from the government and be responsible for their own budget. They will be duly respected to decide on their projects and priorities, being trusted to identify up to 5 priorities to be achieved by their plan over a quantified 5-year term. Each board will have 7 members, with 3 members elected by the community, ensuring local knowledge plays a major role in decision-making on how to spend the hard-earned dollars raised to undertake the most needed projects. The Landscape Board will establish a 5-year landscape plan for their region, and the plan will be simple and publicly accessible. Each Landscape Board will be responsible for employing a General Manager who will employ and direct staff that will deliver environmental management programs on behalf of the Board. As noted, Mr Acting Speaker, annual land and water levy rises will be capped at a rate set by an independent body or according to the Consumer Price Index. And importantly, the levies collected in a region will be spent in that region. And there will be increased transparency with every budget publicly available and outlining how levies will be spent. I believe for the reasons outlined, increased transparency, decentralised decision-making, the focus on using and respecting local knowledge and expertise, the emphasis on better managing natural resources in regional areas, reduction of red tape, better use of funds which translate to actual completed projects, the overall recognition that people want to see more doing and less talking about doing. I believe, with those things said, that this reform will be well received by the electorate in Narungga and the state overall. It is really important to understand why those on this side felt so strongly that there was a need to repeal the Natural Resources Management Act and replace it with this Act we are currently debating, and why the extensive consultation we had with the people of this state has culminated in the introduction of this bill before us and the radical, meaningful, ambitious reform of current management practice. In my patch and surveys across the state, there were similar sentiments that were shown. The people paying the NRM levy had long lost confidence in where and why the money was being collected. 65% of people surveyed did not know how their NRM levy money was being spent. 65%, Mr Acting Speaker. Nor did they know why the levies were continually going up at exorbitant rates at times. We found that there was significant dissatisfaction across the state, and our consultation confirmed key to reform was a requirement for NRM boards to be independent from government. The local community should be able to nominate board members in their own regions, but the levies were too high. Decisions were seen to be being made by people in the city who have not visited the natural environment they are charged with managing. There being seemingly little understanding of local ecosystems or specific problems that needed to be addressed in specific regions, that communities and landholders had no voice. The priorities appeared to be more about compliance and were too light on building relationships, and it is clear that people in my region want more of the decisions affecting them to be made by the people who live in and understand their community and who know what the problems and priorities are. Mr Acting Speaker, I would seek leave to continue my remarks.
The member for Narungga has sought leave to continue his remarks. Is that seconded? All those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. That's carried. Adjourned debate to be taken into consideration.
On motion.
On motion. Is that seconded? All those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. Is carried.